Hello weirdos, I am EmmaAbe. Oh, hey baby, you wanna come up here? This is our little baby. This is my little baby. The newest member of my family. Today I am going to be releasing my rankings for the third round of the Booktube prize. This is very exciting. I'm not doing what I've normally been doing in these videos, which is kind of like vlogging my experience and letting you know my thoughts as I read them, because I failed to do that this time. I completely failed. I finished my first book and I just was like, I'm just going to be explaining my rankings as I release them. So I'm just going to start with number 6, which is the lowest ranked book. That does not mean it's a bad book. It's just like the one I enjoyed the least. For me, that would be Woman of No Importance, The Untold Story of the American Spy Who Helped Win World War I by Sonia Purnell. So there's kind of a bunch of factors that led me putting it into this spot. First of all, I was kind of already put off by it because it's about World War II. Let me explain that. I'm very interested in World War II and I want to read more books about it and books about the Holocaust. I'm just not in a place emotionally to read them. So when I heard that this one was about World War II, I was just like, oh, don't really want to read it. And I think it was kind of like the best book that I could read about World War II because it was all about the spy maneuvers and all of that. And it focused specifically on this one woman. So we heard her specific story, and this is just her story of being a spy. That in itself led it to be less emotionally difficult for me to read. It was very interesting to see what life was like in France at the time. I could have used more of that in this book than we got. Another one of the reasons was in the last round, it was in group like C or something like that. And that group had like 4 books that I was really rooting for, that I really liked. I knew all of them weren't going to make it through, and I was already like emotionally preparing for not all of them making it through. 2 of them made it through and 2 of them didn't, and that what upset me about that was that this book took the 3rd place of one of the other 4 books that I think had a rightful place to be there. That's another part where I was kind of already prejudiced against this book. To actually back up my thoughts and my feelings for putting it in the 6th place is that I just did not enjoy it as much as the other books. I am not really into spy stuff at all. I tend to kind of groan when I see that, like in movies. So just the whole concept of we're following a spy is kind of boring to me. That being said, this being a story of overcoming adversity and being a badass person, if you are looking for that, you're definitely going to find it in this book, because not only does it follow a woman, it follows a disabled woman. She's an amputee. She's missing one of her legs because of an accident, and that was really awesome. I really enjoyed when it particularly talked about the intersection of those identities and how she was constantly passed over and what she did to try and help the war effort when she was constantly being told that no, you cannot do this because you're a woman or because you're disabled. So if you're looking for that, I think you will really enjoy it. But just to me, the book was really long. It was so much longer than it needed to be. I could have dealt with a lot less of the exact details of her spy maneuverings in France. I think a certain bit of that is warranted, but I felt like it was like the majority of the book, and it just became very boring to read about. Well, I really did like the true story of like what it is like to be a spy, or at least a spy in World War II. Very interesting to see how they dealt with communication issues because they didn't have cell phones. I just, in general, found the book kind of boring because of its length. It was so long. I think the audiobook was, 15 hours or something like that. Like I said in my reaction video, I just was very disappointed because I was expecting this to be a really good book because it knocked out two of the books that I really liked in the past round. To me, it just didn't live up to those other books, and I didn't like it as much. That's really all I have to say about this particular book. I think it is still a good book. I think it is well written. If you are going into it looking to see that story of overcoming adversity, you are going to get that and you're going to like it. I just was not super into the concept in general, and then the execution was good. It just was very long, and I could have dealt with it being a lot shorter. What's up, babe? The fifth place I put In the Dream House by Carmen Maria Machado, and I know this book is so well loved by so many people. I did like it. I just didn't think it lived up to the hype. Let me explain it. So I think it's praised by a lot of people who are very used to reading fiction and who like reading a lot of fiction. And this book is very much the most fiction-y non-fiction book you can get. I just don't think I liked all of the fiction aspects of it. I think it was a really interesting way to tell a story. It was a little bit hard for me to follow at times. I am a person who really likes things to be very explicit. At times it was kind of hard for me to grasp what was actually going on and what the timeline of things. Despite that, it was really interesting. It sheds a light on LGBTQ abuse within relationships and how many times women, particularly in LGBTQ relationships, feel like that this abuse is like what they deserve, even though it isn't, because of the fact that they are LGBTQ, and finding someone in the first place is hard, but then finding someone to like you back is hard. So once you find someone that you love, you're like, okay, I'm gonna stick with that person whether or not they're an abusive asshole or not. And I think that is a really interesting perspective to view, and I thought it was really awesome to talk about that and have that story discussed. I just don't think this book was for me because of the fact that I read a lot of nonfiction, so nonfiction is the genre I'm very used to. Having this nonfiction done in like such a weird way didn't work for me as much as I think it works for a lot of other people. It didn't draw out the emotions that I was wanting it to draw out, that I thought it would draw out. That being said, I think Carmen Maria Machado is an amazing person, and she's dealt with a lot of just bullshit that she shouldn't have to, and I'm glad that she is not in that situation right now. I will 10,000% recommend this for people who are looking for a nice bridge into nonfiction from fiction, because sometimes it can be a hard jump because of the genre conveniences of both. It's still a really good book, and that in short is kind of why it landed 5th on this place. So 4th is one that was ranked very highly for me last round, and I got it again. That would be Maybe You Should Talk to Someone, a therapist, her therapist, and Our Lives Revealed by Lori Gottlieb. I don't really know if I should talk too much about this one. I don't really have much else to say other than what I said in the last round's video about it. I liked it a lot. I'm going to point you to the last round's video if you want to know more about like my specific thoughts about it. I just think that compared to the next 3 books that I'm going to talk about, it didn't get me as emotionally, and that was a huge factor for me in ranking these last 4 books, is my emotional just reaction to it. That being said, I think this is an amazing book, and it's a very interesting memoir. I love the way that everything is kind of revealed and the way it's paced. I think it works really well. This little baby just wants some more of her other humans. Third is No Visible Bruises: What We Don't Know About Domestic Violence Can Kill Us by Rachel Louise Snyder. This is the book that I've read most recently. I opened up this book and I was immediately infuriated. I just was so angry. It infuriated me in exactly the way the book was meant to infuriate you, is because the book is all about domestic violence. In the beginning, the author immediately shows you when certain laws were passed in certain places. And I don't remember the exact dates, but she said that violence against animals and pets was made illegal like decades or a decade before violence against women in some places. That just made me so freaking infuriated, and that continued throughout the entire book. And one thing I really liked about this book is that the author doesn't talk about the entirety of domestic violence. She focuses in on specific cases and specific things to talk about within domestic violence and how she wants to approach that subject. So she tells us one very terrifying and depressing story about this one family. It's just terrible. What, baby? What? She talks to this group of men. There's a program in some prisons where they are trying to reform abusers. It's run by fellow abusers, and it seeks to sort of end violence and end our culture around violence and how we train men to constantly react in a violent way to everything, whereas we do not socialize women to do the same, and how that contributes to domestic violence. It was really interesting to see the abuser's side. I just thought that it was very masterfully done. I really liked it. This was a book that going into I wasn't too excited to read about because of its subject matter. I was like, domestic violence, this is going to be really depressing. And it was. The way the author was able to write about it and explain it made me open up my eyes to so many like just toxic behaviors and what I can do as a person to curb those behaviors. One thing I really loved is that the author talked about the psychology of why someone would stay in that situation. She goes on to say that it's not them staying. It's them choosing to survive, and oftentimes it is a woman stealthily trying to get away safely with, if she has children, with the lives of her children. One of the criticisms that I've heard about this book is that it does not discuss LGBTQ, how that intersects with domestic violence, and how it just talks very plainly in women are the victims and men are the abusers, which it does. But there is a nice caveat at the beginning that I think kind of clears all of that up, because the author explains that predominantly, like overwhelmingly so, women are the victims than men. She doesn't say that men can't be the victim. She understands that that definitely happens. It's just significantly more rare than women. So she explained that that's just how she is going to be referring to the cases. And she also said that she was not even going to touch on LGBTQ things because that is very complex and not within the scope of this book, which I would agree. I think that I would love, hey baby, I would love to see her write kind of like a follow-up to this where she does talk about abuse within LGBTQ relationships, because I think that that is a subject that needs to be shed light on a whole lot more, because a lot of times I think people in the queer community don't seem to see that, or kind of view that as an impossibility. Not necessarily an impossibility, but something that doesn't happen to them. It happens to, you know, heterosexual couples, which isn't true. And I think that having a book out there that can help educate people would be very helpful, just as this book is very helpful. So I would highly recommend it. That was a very good book. Those whole issues didn't really bother me because she addressed them, and I would love to see her do more in the future. Okay, so number 2 book is this guy. I bought it. Know My Name by Chanel Miller. This book almost brought me to freaking tears. Holy crap. This is one of the books that I, again, was very nervous to read. It was very difficult to read because of the subject material. This tells Chanel Miller's story about being raped. So automatically I knew that it was going to be very difficult to read. And I remember when I first sat down to read this months ago, I couldn't get through it. It was very hard. The first like 5 minutes, I was like, I can't do this. So I put it down. Then I picked it up again because I had to read it. And I was so glad I did, because it made me feel just so validated about so many different things that happens to women just on a daily basis, like catcalling, that build up and make people feel unsafe to do basic things like walking. And she makes a very good point that really resonated with me, is that why should I have to sacrifice something that I enjoy doing, like walking or running or whatever, at any time because of men who are disgusting human beings who will attack me? That I should not have to do that. And it's kind of ridiculous for people to expect me to do that rather than the men to stop being dickholes. I'm just so freaking happy that she wrote this, and I'm just gonna gush about it so much. Her story is heartbreaking and terrifying. It connected with me on just such a personal level, and I loved it so much. Just hearing her story about what it took for her to press charges was insane. I think that more people should read this because it helps explain like just how freaking difficult it is to press charges against someone, between all of the court date changes to having to relive your trauma over and over and over. When you're trying to press charges, I feel like the entire world is automatically against you, and you have to constantly be reopening your wounds and saying, here, look at me bleed, over and over and over again, in order for someone to believe a tiny bit of your story. And it's ridiculous. The system is automatically set up against victims. It's automatically set up against people like Chanel. It just makes me feel so good that this book exists, because it not only details all of that information, but it also is just very affirming, and it's like, hey, stick in there, you can do it. One thing it really illustrates really well is how being raped or how being harassed can stick with you. That's one thing that I think a lot of people who either haven't been put in that situation, like mostly men, don't really understand what it can do psychologically, the damage it can do, and how disruptive and how much it can destroy someone's life. I feel like oftentimes it's always talked about how a rape accusation can hurt a man and how it can completely destroy their life, when it's not really talked about how being raped can completely destroy a woman's life. I really love this book, and I'm very glad I have it now to put up on my shelves. And okay, I need to stop talking and talk about the next book. I think we need some puppy time to feel better. And my daddy. Look at her. She's so cute. Say hi to the camera. She's so sweet. We love her. Do you like to cuddle? Do you like to cuddle with me? Okay, last book. This one. Number 1. I went into this round knowing it would be very difficult to knock this one off the number 1 space. And it stayed there. God damn it. I read this all the way back in like January. I've reread it, And then I have also read parts of it with my mom in the car because she's reading this right now and she's loving it. And this book has almost like brought me to freaking tears. It is so powerful. And I'm going to insert some clips of back from when I first read this to try and help explain my thoughts about it. I'm probably going to say it in the clip, but I'll say it again. I think one of the most effective way to read this is listening and following along, because the audiobook is very powerful in and of itself. They do an excellent job, but also there are pictures interspersed amongst the text that I think add significantly to the experience of reading it when you have the pictures. Like, they have them interspersed like this, and then they also have, like typical nonfiction, them like this.
I'm gonna be honest, I don't remember 9/11. I was alive at the time, but I don't really remember learning anything until I was in about 5th grade, and I remember that very vividly. This was fucking amazing. This is a 5-star easily. I think this one will go on to the next round, and if it doesn't, I will be very sad. It was so good. What I really liked about it was the aim of this book was not to answer the how or the why. It was more of like what it was like to experience 9/11, and it's extensive. It talks about everything from both towers to the Pentagon to flight, what was it, like 93, 97 or something like that. Listening to what these people went through, and the audiobook also is fabulous. Audiobook is absolutely fabulous too. Full cast recording, highly recommend it. The audiobook for this. So good. And I just love the way it was written. It's all like interspersed. So you'll hear like a snippet of one person's, and then you'll hear a snippet of another person's, and that's how the story is told. It's not told as like, oh, this is what one person experienced, tell their whole story, and then here's what another person experienced, tell their whole story, which is what I really like. And I think that is the trend that I've been seeing when it comes to like oral histories in books, and I like that. I like that trend. Let's keep it up, people. Great trends. I was fighting tears. Because I was just like, I don't want my dad to look over to me and be like, EmmaAbe, why the fuck are you crying? It was so powerful, so moving, and it was something that I felt like I've never really learned about in school. I've never learned about the impact of what it was like. I have been to Ground Zero. I did not go to the museum, because at the time I was really traumatized because I was dealing with a lot of crap in my personal, it wasn't crap, it was just, there was lots of things in my personal life that was going on at the time, and I was like, I cannot put myself through that emotional turmoil. I was barely holding it together as of that time. It was a really dark time in my life. It's over for the most part. So I didn't see the museum, so I can't speak on what the museum looks like. But if it's anything like what this book captures, it's going to be fabulous. I have no plans on going there anytime soon. I don't have any plans of going to New York anytime soon. Oh my god. It was so good. I recommend it wholeheartedly. And I'm not sure if they have this in the actual book, but in the audiobook, there is a nice interview between one of the voice actors and the writer, and it's like a supplemental little oral history about what it was like for his experience as someone who was aiding first responders. And that was a real nice treat that I was not expecting to get in the audiobook, and it was really good. It was so evocative of what was going on. You know, I didn't know that all of the terror that went in during those few days, because you didn't know, you know, once the first tower was hit, people didn't know if it was just a one-off thing, and then the second tower was hit, and then the Pentagon was hit. People were going crazy. It was so terrifying. And there's a part that sticks out to me where there were offices obviously there are offices in the World Trade Center, but they were like national offices, so they would have other offices around America. The Twin Towers like called other offices, like saying like, hey, does anyone know, can like anyone help us? We're stuck. And it recounts like some of the stories of those people who heard those messages from the California or Chicago, and how they felt so powerless and they didn't know what's going on, and then all of a sudden it's just dead because the tower fell. It was crazy. The timeline, so fast. I mean, jeez. I think that this book was very appropriately timed. I mean, the author said it himself. He said that he wrote this at a time when we have the first generation of people who are graduating high school who have not lived through this, who have not lived through 9/11, who have no memories of it, who were not alive at the time, and how we need to keep this alive. I don't know how far this book is going to go, but I hope it goes far. I know it's at least going to make it through this first round. I'm super excited for that. Obviously, 5 out of 5. So good. I'm going to reread it because I want to and I needed to. I bought the book after I read it, so I want to read it with following along now. I'm so excited. So good. So good.
That's it. Those are my rankings. Let me know what you thought. Did you enjoy seeing the baby? We love her. Yeah, so that is it. Like, comment, subscribe. Let me know if you participated in this round. What did you think of my rankings? Also, what was your favorite book that you've read for the Booktube prize so far? Which one do you think is going to win? There's only 12 books left, so let's see. I'm very excited. All right, bye. Say goodbye, baby. I really did like this. A priest hurt. Oh my god. I'm rambling. Oh my god. She's precious. We love her.